neurodevelopmental of risky behavior to students, parents, and staff. In 2020, she published her long-awaited neurodevelopmental prevention book, The NeuroWhereAbouts Guide for Parents and Families Who Want to Prevent Youth High-Risk Behavior. In 2023, she published FOO Mapping for people who want to change their family of origin thinking, feeling, and behavioral patterns that no longer serve them, and Know Your Neuro, Adventures of a Growing Brain for Kids in K through 5. So welcome, Dr. Crystal Collier.
Thank you so much. I feel so honored to be here. I attended the prevention conference just a couple months ago in Tampa, and it was fantastic. So it always fires me up to be a part of anything that Drug-Free America does. So I'm really happy to be here today. Okay, let me share my screen and then start this from the beginning. Okay, fantastic. So today, we're going to talk about brain-based parenting tools to set up kids for success. So I'll share a little bit about my story first, because I think it's what actually really qualifies me to give this information to you guys. So these are pictures of me when I was growing up. When I was about 11, 12 years old, my parents got a divorce. We moved to a new city. And I started experiencing a lot of anxiety, which is really normal when you're going through puberty. But I started engaging in some risky behavior, alcohol use, substance use. By the time I was 16 years old, that third picture in, I had tried intravenous substances. Things were going downhill pretty fast. But amazingly, I always made A's in school. Studying was not hard for me. School was pretty easy. I was blessed in that way. But when I graduated a year early from high school and went into college, things went downhill academically as well, in conjunction with my failing health because of my substance use problem. So after an overdose, I picked up the phone and called my mom and asked for some help. It was a really tough phone call. But that last awesome big Texas hair picture of me, I am from Texas, you guys, was born up north, but I've lived my whole life in Texas. So that picture was taken the day that I graduated from rehab at age 18. I just celebrated 35 years of continuous sobriety recovery. And what happened, though, is my first couple years in recovery, I experienced a lot of shame, guilt, confusion. I could not understand why I made such terrible decisions. As a good kid, I have a good family. I just really couldn't understand it. So when I got back into college, I started studying everything I could get my hands on about substances to really answer that question. And that's when all these really cool brain studies were being published, because functional MRI technology was now so inexpensive, they could use it in research studies. It was really cool. So after quite a few years of working on this, studying this, I put everything that I learned into a parent guide, the NeuroWhereAbouts guide. And so let me share with you what that means. The NeuroWhereAbouts. I think every parent and clinician should know how to identify what neurodevelopmental stage a child is in, and then to parent accordingly, according to what that brain can and will be able to do. So it's also available in Spanish, and both of those are on Amazon, as well as an Audible copy. Now, the Audible version is 14 hours long. You'll listen to me talk for a long time, but I'm an Audible person. I love Audible, so I wanted to make sure it was available on that avenue, as well as ebook too. But this book is about 400 pages. It is really designed to take you through all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade with your kids. So it teaches parents what are healthy parenting skills and techniques they can use to set kids up for success, as well as what they can do to prevent risky behavior. So I graphed 18 high-risk behaviors so parents would know, okay, it spikes now, so when should I have my conversation? And then it gives you a checklist and easy to follow infographics for what to say and teach kids about the neurodevelopmental effects of these behaviors. Okay, so let's jump into what we're going to talk about. I've got 10 concepts and skills to teach you guys today. So the first one is going to be illustrated by Neuro. Know Your Neuro, who is the adventurer of my children's book series, the superhero, the brain Neuro. So you can see Neuro actually learning about itself. The first of a 10-book series, Know Your Neuro, Adventures of a Growing Brain, teaches kids about their brain. What I want kids to do is fall in love with their brain, so they protect it over time. So I'll make sure you guys get a copy of the coloring page if you want to give it to little ones. But I want to share with you guys the story of how I started to learn about this information. And it was really because of one of my favorite brain researchers who specializes in adolescent brain research. His name is Dr. Lawrence Steinberg, and his quote is really one of my favorites. He says that an adolescent has a well-developed accelerator, but only a partly developed brake. So this is how we want to teach kids about their brain's development. What part of the brain is the accelerator, that gas pedal that makes you go? That part is the limbic system, located deep inside, well-protected part of the brain that actually comes online and fully develops by the time kids are 11, 12 years old. But the brake, the part of the brain that is the brake, is right behind your forehead, about halfway up your skull. We all know that now today as the prefrontal cortex or the frontal lobes, the part of the brain that helps you slow down and do higher level thinking skills and really allows you to control your impulses and stop before you get into trouble with different things. However, the brake is not fully developed until about 25. And so what is this? A cruel joke that nature has played on parents? Well, it might be. But we really need our limbic system, our fight or flight survival part of the brain, to actually protect ourselves while we're going through puberty, now that we have these new skills and abilities. So parents, the first thing you need to know about brain development is that it grows in two major stages. The first is that accelerators grow from birth to about age 11, 12, when we grow 200 billion neurons. It's like we get this big chunk of clay that we're going to sculpt into the masterpiece of our adult brain. So by the time we're about 11, 12 years old, we have 200 billion brain cells. That's a lot of cells that we're not going to actually end up using. So puberty kicks in that second phase of brain development. And from there all the way up to about 25, we lose about half of those neurons. But what we end up with is a fully developed, sculpted adult brain. But why do we lose 50% of the neurons that we just created? This seems like a waste of good brain cells. What we need to do is to make room for connectors. So let me show you what I mean. This is a picture of an infant's neuron, a little baby brain cell, magnified quite a bit so that we can see it. What we're seeing here is that cell body, that darkest spot there, and from there all the way up is our axon, and then what looks like tree branches and tree roots. Those are called dendrites. Those are the connectors. Now, dendrites are the most important, to me, brain structure. And so I want you guys to remember that word. So everybody say dendrites 3 times fast. Dendrites, dendrites, dendrites. That is your battle cry as a parent. And here's why. Dendrites are literally the hardware of learning. Every time you learn something new or practice something, you grow new dendrites that reach out to other cells, making these long chains of connections in your brain. So this shows you those infant baby neurons growing all the way up to about age 2, which is so beautiful to see because what you're literally looking at, you guys, is a skill. A skill. We don't know what skill because this is the hardware of that skill. And then, of course, by the time you're 25 years old, every neuron in your brain is connected to about 10,000 other neurons. Wow, that's a lot of networking that has to fit inside your skull, literally squishing down as those connectors grow and develop, which is literally what makes those funky wrinkles and grooves in your brain. So this is one of my favorite brain studies that shows kids developing over time with a functional MRI scan that shows you what's going on. And so you can see that these connectors are primarily growing in the frontal lobe, right behind the forehead, halfway up the skull. And the darker the color, the less cells or gray matter, and the more connectors, that white matter. Now, it's important to remember that this is the adult part of our brain. And we do have a frontal lobe when we're younger, but it's just immature and underdeveloped. But that's okay. We rely on our parents' frontal lobes, our teachers' frontal lobes. We get to about age 11, 12, and we've got about 10 to 15% of our adult brain. By the time we're 16, we've got about 45% of our adult brain, which is scary because we usually here in the United States give kids a license to drive at about age 16 with half a brain. It's why our insurance rates are so high. And then you can see at about age 20, we've got about 80% of our adult brain online. We have a lot left to go. Okay, that's what you guys need to know about the 2 phases of brain development. Now, let's talk about the second most important thing for parents to understand, the brain's rule. The brain has a rule that all of these dendrites use to grow with. That rule is use it or lose it. And so it's very important to remember that the frontal lobe has been nicknamed the CEO of the brain and the body because it does all of your executive functioning skills. Now, those skills are basically your basic thinking, feeling, and doing skills, and they grow according to those 2 phases. So in the first half of brain development, we're growing what scientists refer to as our lower level executive functioning skills. Now, these are the ones, as you can see, that we need to get up in the morning, out the door, remembering our homework or remembering our lunch. And so these are the ones that are our basic first floor level of skills. If you think about the brain as a building with all the levels of scaffolding in between, here is the first layer of executive functioning. And then as we move into the second phase of brain development, please know there's a lot of overlap here too. Each kid is different, but we start to develop higher level executive functioning skills that really come online during that second phase of brain development, the second scaffolding level. Now, these are the skills that we need to get up and out of our parents' house, becoming fully self-supporting, relational, healthy adults. These are all contingent upon the brain's rule. Use it or lose it. So I want you to imagine that you're going to apply some brain-based praise and brain-based parenting to make sure that these skills grow long strings of networked neurons in your child's brain. Okay, now the third important thing that you need to know is how does risky behavior affect that brain development? All of those dendrites and neurons that are growing and connecting. How are those affected by risky behavior? Now, as I've been a therapist, it's been interesting because this is my 26th year in practice, and I've seen my first half of the career be really all about alcohol and substances. But my second half of my career has really expanded into high-risk behavior that has a negative effect on brain development. And a few of those, bullying, definitely cyberbullying, eating disorders. We see a whole lot more issues with technology exposure, as well as negative eating patterns and a sedentary life, pornography exposure, gambling, depression, anxiety. So here is what we know about our longitudinal studies. They show that the younger we expose, or a youth is exposed to a substance, the greater their risk of growing up and struggling with a substance use disorder. Now, 28% of the population of kids who engage in a substance use before the age of 18 get diagnosed with some sort of an addictive disorder as an adult. Now, I know a lot of people out there are thinking, well, that leaves a lot of people who never become dependent or abuse substances. And yes, that is definitely true. But we have to think about what we're doing when we have early exposure to kids and how we want to delay that so that our kids are able to be in that percentage of the population who can potentially use substances like alcohol or other things that might be deemed as recreationally in the spirit of recreationally, which is also healthily. Now, if you look at this graph, what you see is a beautiful slope down. Now, notice that last bar there. You can almost completely eliminate your risk of growing up and struggling with any type of addictive or abusive issue if you completely delay until the age of 21. And this actually also goes for people who have the genetics. Now, genetics put us at a little higher percentage risk, but if we delay those genes from kicking in and expressing themselves in a way that would just predispose us to changes, brain changes sooner. Now, when I looked at this data, I also kept finding studies about mental health issues that show the average age of onset of almost every mental health issue out there is elementary, middle, or high school, as you see in this graph. So this made me wonder, okay, what's going on? And all of it points to neurodevelopment and the fragility of all of those dendrites that are growing and developing in our brain during that time. Risky behaviors have a really negative effect. So let's do a deep dive into what that effect looks like. So if we take a look at a seminal study that was done by NIDA, Nora Volkow's office. So what we see here in this functional MRI is a picture of the brain looking from the top down into it. The top 3 slides are what our brains look like when there's no substances, no intoxicants in our brain. Everything's turned on. All the lobes, the limbic system, everything is connected and working together, which is what we need. But if you look at the picture on the bottom, you will spot a limbic system that is lit up and a frontal lobe that actually is shut off. Now, this is a picture of somebody who's ingested cocaine as a part of this study. But I have looked at so many brain pictures over the years, and what I have seen is that all of them have this picture in common. No matter what substance you're looking at, when you see exposure, you see the frontal lobe starting to shut off and the limbic system lighting up. Okay, so what does this mean if your brain is growing and developing? If your brain is trying to grow and develop while the frontal lobe is off, does it get to grow in a natural, healthy trajectory? We now know that the answer to that is definitely not. And so if you think about it, if a young person starts using a substance at about age 12, and they use it pretty consistently up until the age of 20, and then they decide, okay, I want to stop, and we take a picture of their brain, what you're going to see is a frontal lobe that doesn't look like that one. That is a healthy brain with no substance exposure. Now, what's scary about this to me is what if they don't stop? What if they keep going all the way to the age of 25? What you're going to see is executive functioning skills that should have peaked at 25, peaking much lower. And of course, it depends upon the frequency and intensity and consistency of the substances that you've been using or the behavioral issues that you are going through. family of origin, violence, feeling fear and scared can shut off the frontal lobe too and cause lots of anxiety and depression. And so one of my missions in life, really my main mission, is to keep kids from doing it and engaging in it as long as possible. Delay, delay, delay. So let me give you some specific studies that really illustrate this point. So this is a study that was done just on alcohol use, comparing two 15-year-olds, one who drank heavily, one who did not, while they were both in a fMRI doing a memory task. What is really obvious here is that our non-drinker has a lot more electrical activity, as you can see by the pink and the orange colors, than our heavy drinker. But look at the subtle differences here. You can see that our non-drinker is growing those long networks that squish down into the brain, making all those funky wrinkles and grooves. But our heavy drinker does not have that kind of brain structure yet due to arrested development all over the brain. And if we take a look at an example of marijuana use, this to me is even scarier because marijuana use has a longer half-life than alcohol. A lot of people think that marijuana is actually safer or healthier than alcohol. But in many comparisons, what we see over time is that marijuana can be far more damaging than alcohol use, especially for many youth because of the intensity of what it's being modified to. So it's much more potent, and the half-life. When I say half-life, I mean how long it stays in your body. And that could be 1 week if you're a moderate, mild user, or it can be up to 6 weeks if you're a moderate or heavy daily user. This is a scan from the Amen Clinic, and what you'll see is a beautiful scan of a brain. This type of scan looks at brain connectivity from the bottom up through the brain. And if all your neurons are nice and connected, you're going to see a nice smooth scan. These two gentlemen here have a history of smoking marijuana, the green leafy bud. And what you can see are areas of the brain that just have not connected yet, especially in those frontal lobe areas. And I want you to think about these guys as they grow and develop. Think about their executive functioning skills that are based on the brain's rule. Use it or lose it. You don't use them, they don't grow those networks, they don't connect. And those executive functioning skills, especially the ones in the second phase of brain development, are the ones that are not growing as much. Their critical thinking, impulse control, emotion regulation, frustration tolerance, their ability to show empathy are all going to be so much lower, statistically significantly lower, if we were able to measure that. Okay, let's look at some emotional issues. This is a brain scan of an adult who's been suffering from chronic depression compared to somebody who does not suffer from that. So I don't like the word healthy here because it seems like I'm not quite sure how healthy the other person is, but they don't have depression compared to somebody who does. Now, what you'll notice is that the frontal lobe is much darker. And this is what happens if you've ever experienced a bout of depression or love someone who has it. It's almost like the lights are just turned off because the frontal lobe is not on and functioning like it normally would. And this can be a chronic condition that, if a child is suffering from it, can arrest the same executive functioning skills that substance use could. We also know that depression and substance use go hand in hand in many ways. A lot of kids try to medicate their mood issues with substances that unfortunately just compound, exacerbate, and make it worse. If we take a look at recovery, though, this is such a beautiful scan, and there's so many out there like this. When I started reading this, that's just renewed my motivation as a therapist, working with kids and families, because this person has gone through a few weeks of therapy. They did talk therapy and an antidepressant therapy, and their brain is recovering. You can see the frontal lobe is really lighting back up, as is all the other parts of the brain. I know it's beautiful, isn't it? I really appreciate you said that in the chat. Thank you, because it is. And we can turn that part of the brain back on for kids. And guess what? They get to start growing those executive functioning skills again. And, if we look at things like technology overuse, we're starting to see the same type of issues. I have more clients on my caseload that are video game addicts, and they're all in their late 20s, early 30s. They're having a lot of difficult time with parenting, with showing empathy, attunement, and connection to their kids, and getting called on by child protective services for neglect or abuse. And so this is a beautiful seminal study to me. It was published back in 2013, but I've seen a lot of studies replicate this, that they're my favorite graphic though. So I wanted to show it to you. The red dots, if you were to connect all of them, you would see brain connectivity of a healthy group of adolescents who used recreational technology minimally on a daily basis, but minimally. Then they showed a group of adolescents who dropped out of school and spent a lot of time, in some cases 12 or more hours a day, at an internet cafe. The purple lines show their connectivity. Now look at this, you guys. You can see there on the top, lots of dense connections. I want you to think use it or lose it, because what you see here is this is the sensory and the motor cortex area right there on top of the brain. They're using that part of their brain to navigate technology. But look at how many networks they have into their frontal lobe. One area of connectivity. Again, I think about what these kids are going to do and be when they grow up. What kind of a parent are they going to make, or an employee are they going to be with higher level executive functioning skills? Okay, so that shows you a little bit. There's so much brain science out there that illustrates this. But let's move into our fifth area that parents need to understand, is prevention science. Now, the Drug Free of America published some recent information about how prevention can save money. For every dollar spent on prevention, we can save up to 10 or more dollars in later long-term costs. And so what I did when I was writing my book is I did a thorough literature review on, okay, does prevention work? And we know that it does. It has to be consistent over our kids' neurodevelopmental lifespan. And so what I did was I put a short list together of what you can do as a parent to apply prevention science principles to your daily life. So the first thing is consistently offer prevention in schools and at home. And I'm going to teach you a really easy way to add that into your language. Make sure kids stay in pro-social activities. What we see is that when kids stop doing a sport, they get bored, they have more free time, and if they have more expendable income, they might get curious about a lot of positive things, but also about a lot of negative things as well. And so make sure they stay in either a sport, a club, or a job every semester of school. So we have 3 semesters here, mostly in the United States. So spring, summer, and fall, kids should have to have one of those 3. And parents, if your kids won't choose what to do, then you say, if you don't choose, I'm going to choose for you. So it's in your best interest to choose. Make sure that you break bread together regularly. My heart goes out to people out there that are struggling with lack of food. So I just wanted to put that out there in the world and send positive energy to those families and countries. Regular family dinners are protective. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. Make sure you involve kids in proactive community action. On the holidays, take them to feed homeless, to go to soup kitchens, to do volunteer work, Habitat for Humanity. Get them involved and expose their frontal lobes to the humane activities that we can offer and volunteer for other people who need it, so they can have and grow empathy skills for being human and how humans struggle with a lot of different social things. Brain-based praise, we're going to talk about that a little bit more too, and create a family code. I'm going to show you how to do that, and then give consequences. And I'll show you the behavior modification contract that I use, and then treat problems immediately. So it's not okay to just give a kid a slap on the wrist. Kids will say, oh, my mom and dad don't care if I drink alcohol. And when I go and ask mom and dad, they say, oh no, our rule is they can only drink at home. But you see how that frontal lobe misinterpreted that information. And so please make sure you treat problems when they crop up. Okay, now let's go into specifics. What do I mean when I say brain-based praise? So this is pretty interesting because when I was writing my book, I did a lot of research on praise because I wanted to find out, is there anybody out there who's coined this term before? And not yet, but there are a few other praises out there. And so I want to compare and contrast. But first, what I want to do is give you a few examples. What you want to do is memorize these lists. And in my book, I literally have them on 2 pages. You can print them, put them up someplace, tear them out of the book, or I'll make sure you have these slides so you can print this off. I have this laminated in my office, and I ask my clients, kids and adults, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How well do you do on these skills? And I love this because you can teach kids the definition of these if they don't already know. And for adults, remember, we grow dendrites for the rest of our lives because we can always learn. We just learn slower after the age of 25 as the rate of plasticity starts to decrease. But remember, all of these are based upon use it or lose it. So the more self-aware we are, the more we can assess ourselves and apply these skills, the more they grow. So as a parent, this is what I want you to do. I want you to literally memorize these and use them in your daily language. So here's what it does not sound like. Let's take that first one, task initiation. You don't want to say, oh, good job task initiating, Johnny. No, they're going to look at you like, who are you, Mom? But this is how it sounds like. Dude, Johnny, you took out the trash. I didn't even have to remind you. Thank you. That is how you integrate that in to your brain-based praise on a daily basis. Okay, so here's what we want to do. We want to memorize these and be able to say, ooh, I like how you solved that problem. Tell me how you did it. That was a great decision. Tell me how you got to that conclusion. Wow, this week you calmed down much faster than you did last week. I appreciate how a few weeks ago you blew up and now you're handling this frustration much better. Wow, what's going on? Kiddo, thank you so much for showing me empathy today. Or, you know what, hon? I need you to show me some more empathy right now. I'm struggling. It is absolutely important to use these skills. And when you ask kids, tell me how you got to that conclusion. Tell me what your brain was thinking. A lot of times what they might say is, I don't know. Remember, that's not a real answer. It's just a cop-out. What you can do is say to kids, oh, well, tell me when you figure it out. And that way their brain will be cogitating on this. Okay, let me show you what I mean by the difference between brain-based praise and performance-based praise. Performance is good job, nice work. Nothing wrong with performance-based praise. But what we see is if we only use performance-based praise, we run the risk of increasing performance anxiety and letting kids think that their value and worth is connected to their performance. Intelligence-based praise. Oh, you're so smart. That'll be no problem for you because you have such a high IQ. The danger here is that when kids do meet their IQ ceiling and they struggle with a task, they may attribute their failure to not being so smart instead of effort. So we want to use a little bit of both of these and a lot of brain-based praise. Thank you for calming down so quickly. I really liked how you showed your sister empathy today. I appreciate that I didn't even have to ask you to do that. The way you solved that problem, amazing, kiddo. When you praise a behavior, the behavior goes up. But parents, we say a lot more negative things than we say a lot more positive. Make sure that your positive to negative ratio is 5 positives for every 1 negative thing that you say. So this gives you a lot of behavior to do that with. And in the book, I actually put a lot of brain-based scripts so that you know what that sounds like if you're struggling with it. Okay, so what I want you to think about is how you might add this into your own language. Think about the scripts that you might use to increase a lot of these skills. One of the most important ones is tell me how you did that. Tell me what you were thinking. That increases abstract conceptual thinking. Now, what is abstract conceptual thinking? Hypothetical what ifs. This skill is critical for humans to be able to grow empathy. What do you need to feel empathy? You need the ability to think about what someone else is thinking and what someone else is feeling. Both of those, cognitive and affective empathy, require abstract what-if thinking to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So when you increase this skill, you move kids away from concrete, all or nothing, black and white thinking, my way or the highway. And don't you guys think the world needs a whole lot more abstract, empathic thinking today? Yes. Okay. So use a lot of abstract thinking scripts. Okay. Now, let's move into some of the concrete skills that you can use in your family. The first one, create a family code. Okay, so when I was doing research on this, I learned that a lot of kids are not going to church anymore. The church attendance is coming down. So the morals and the values that they might learn there is not happening as much. The civic lessons that kids used to get in schools, they don't get those so much anymore. And so we need to be able to create a sense of unity in our family, in our country, in our city, in our neighborhood. And the way that we can do that is by creating a family code. So I have in the tools section of my book a really easy 1-page, 3-step process that I'm going to teach you now to create your code. And here's mine. In our family, we treat others with kindness, compassion, and respect on and offline. We show up online just how we would in person. And you represent our family code, so we expect you to do that. We take care of our brain development. We don't engage in risky behavior. We never use drugs and only use alcohol when we're 21 or over. Now, here is what you do. I've been doing this at churches and schools all over Texas, and I actually just did one in Oregon a few months ago. So I'd love to come to your city and help you guys create a family code workshop. It's really easy to do. I can send you some of the information as well. The first step, bring families together, feed them, offer childcare, and teach them about the brain. And then help them brainstorm family values. I always give them a list of different values they can choose from, but you can also Google it. There's one in the book as well. On my website, I've got Brene Brown's list of family values. So you pick out 2 or 3 of these. The second step is you decide on the no's as a family. You go through the list of 18 high-risk behavior and you pick out the ones that are a no-no in your family. And then you sit and you write down, okay, what risky behavior do we say no to, and why do we say no to these behaviors? The third and final step is you combine your sentences and you get your code. So it might look like this. In our family, we blank. We say no because of this, and that creates what we do together as a family. Okay, now, the next important thing, using the code consistently. So here are the 18 high-risk behaviors. I spent 4 years during a literature review on each one of these and how they affect the brain. They're all in the book according to when they show up sequentially as kids develop. And so here's how you want to use these. You're going to need to talk to kids about all of these as they grow and develop. This feels really daunting, but here's how you do it. You use a conversation starter calendar. In the book, I actually have 2 pages of these that show you what's going on prevention days each month. On knowyourneuro.org, I actually have a calendar that has those in them with the videos that come along. It is a free website that can be translated into different languages. So please, world, use that resource. I'll be putting more videos often. Okay, so what you're going to do is at the family dinner table, you're going to say to your kids, hey, did you guys know it's National Eating Disorders Week? Your kids are going to be like, Dad, who are you? What are you talking about? And then you simply say, do you guys know anybody who has an eating disorder? And if they say no, okay, good, check. You'll wait till next year and do that all over again. One day, one of your children will say, oh yeah, Sally has anorexia. Then you're going to use the 3 magic words, tell me more, and let them talk about it. Then simply refer back to the family code and say something like, well, that wouldn't happen in our family because we have our code. Eating disorders would hurt brain development. And so we want to make sure that we protect our brain. But if you ever struggle with body image, please come talk to me about it, or I'll find a clinician for you too. Done. Conversation over. No lecture. Just family unity. What we do, how we protect our brain. Then in 2-3 weeks, you look at the calendar again and say, oh, guess what, you guys? It's National Smoke Out Day. And your kids are going to be like, Mom, what are you talking about? Well, today, everybody in the world tries to quit smoking or using tobacco. Do you guys know anybody who vapes or smokes? Again, if they say no, check. Do the same conversation next year. If they say yes, oh, Johnny got in trouble at school for vaping in the bathroom. Tell me more. Well, that wouldn't happen in our family. Now, if a child says, well, Mom, what if I did? You can simply say, it's important that you tell us. If you come to us and tell us, your consequence will be much lower. If we find out from somebody else besides you, your consequence will double or triple. Now, do that every 3, 4, 5 weeks as your children grow and develop. They feel unity. They know what to say when they go out into the world. And the research shows the more family dinners we have together, the more unified and connected kids feel. The more we know about our kids, and the less they engage in high-risk behavior. The Family Dinner Project is my favorite website for this information. Now, also in the book, we can use the talks that are there. Like, for instance, the gambling talk has a fun game you can play to teach kids the higher level skill of understanding how to calculate odds. We need to talk to kids about pornography at earlier ages, but what do we say? Don't worry, you guys, I put it developmentally there for you. Teach kids how to critically analyze the media, because we're seeing underage sex, pornography use, and drug use on TV glamorized in such a way that it normalizes it for our youth. Teach kids what a medicine is and what a medicine is not. We know that marijuana in and of itself can be used medicinally for certain really difficult things, but not to cure any diseases, but to treat the really debilitating symptoms of things like immune issues or seizure disorders. If you guys don't have any of those, then you don't need to treat those symptoms. So what is it? What is it not? I've got a lot of different contracts. I've searched every contract out there and put them together into a brain-based language. And I also have the whereabouts log. So when kids go to other people's houses for slumber parties and sleepovers, remember that can be a dangerous place where they could be exposed to risky behavior. So this gives you a script that you can pick up the phone and call the other parent and say, hey, let's get on the same page. And then number 9. Behavior modification, because every single kid is going to make a mistake and they may engage, but here is your script. So what you're going to say if they do is, we hope you follow our family's code, but in case you make a different decision, tell me. You'll have a consequence, but that consequence will be really small if you tell me. It will double or triple if I find out that you broke our family code from someone else, like a teacher or a coach or a police officer. Honesty is always the best policy, but I know your brain's developing, kiddo, and you can make some bad decisions. I get that. but I have scientific justification to be your frontal lobe until you grow one of your own. And if parents are struggling with some of these issues themselves, please get help right away and involve your kids in that process. We do kids camp and lots of kids group here that help kids learn and understand how to love and support and set boundaries with family members who are also struggling. Then if your kids need some behavior modification, I actually have a contract and an example in the book. But you got to remember, put the positive behavior first, not the negative. So you don't want to say don't do drugs. You want to say be sober, be healthy, protect your brain. And if you do, you will earn the following rewards. Everything should be earned. Only food, shelter, love, and attention should be given freely to kids. All the stuff that they get should earn with being respectful, responsible, and being fun to be with. And if they don't, you can introduce some paper into their lives. But remember, prepare for what we call an extinction burst or a temper tantrum. If kids are used to getting what they want and you're starting to change and modify their behavior, the behavior might go up first before it goes down. The key here is be consistent. Now, number 10, tools to use consistently may be a little difficult, but if you introduce them early, they're easy. Now, drug testing. It can be a tool. It's weird, it's uncomfortable, some people don't like it, but on their 11th, 12th birthday, give them all their birthday presents and then a cup with a red ribbon on it and say, oh my God, you guys, guess what? You're about to go through the second stage of brain development when you're growing higher level executive functioning skills. So I'm going to give you the #1 refusal skill for you to use throughout your middle and high school and college career. I'll drug test you randomly. Then you can go to that party and somebody may offer you something and you can say, no, my dad drug tests me, or my school drug tests me, my sports team drug tests me. No, I'll pass. No, thanks. I'm good. Start that early. If you suspect, then test. Have a bulk box of testing ready to go. I have a couple of websites that are reputable in my book that you can buy those from. Then use knowyourneuro.org, www.knowyourneuro. This is the front page of my website. As you can see, there are lots of topics that are listed by substance or mental health or behavioral health. There are lots of skills. All the executive functioning skills are there. I'll be adding more and more videos as time goes by. If you want me to create one for you or your school, let me know. But all the videos are also there from age group. So I've got K through 2, 3 through 5, and 6 through 12. There's also a schools page, a family page that has the blank behavior contract in it, lots of stuff, and a student page that has an internship application and a video contest announcement. So please make sure that you use your tools consistently. Schools should do good prevention at least every month. And if you think about it, that's literally 6 to 8 times per year. It's really easy to use some of these videos in health classes 6 to 8 times per year. If you want me to come out and train your staff on how to use this, please let me know. Or if you want me to do a video for your school or community, please let me know. All right, you guys, now it's time for questions. Here is my information, the website for the book and for the prevention program, also my professional website and my book offerings. The NeuroWhereAbouts guide, available English, Spanish, ebook on Audible, the first edition of the kids' books, age K through 2, 3 through 5. And I'm also a therapist that helps people with family of origin issues that their network has repeated over and over as an adult. That's not working very well. I call it family of origin mapping. So thank you guys. I'm seeing a lot of messages in the chat that say great strategies, good things to do at home. And so if you guys have any questions, now is the time.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Collier. On behalf of all attendees and Drug Free America Foundation, I extend my heartfelt gratitude for your enlightening presentation on brain-based tools for parenting. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge and inspiring us to better understand and support the neurodevelopmental journey of our youth. Wow, your expertise and your dedication really comes out throughout this presentation, and I truly enjoyed it. What I really liked is not only did you educate us, you showed us with the fascinating brain images, but also like its action plan that you're putting, what we can do with our youth. And wow, it was really great, and I really appreciate it. We do have, and we've gotten great feedback in the chat box. There are a couple questions. Let's see. I see one saying, in reference to your infographic on risky behavior, have you compared younger adults' brain in America to European young adults' brain, where it is common and acceptable for access to substances? Was there any
Absolutely.
difference or effects?
Well, it's interesting because I've looked at all the global research on brain development, and our brains develop really similar across the globe. We're humans, and so we have a very similar trajectory. And it's interesting because across the globe, the younger the drinking ages, the more permissive the laws are about underage drinking, the more arrested development you see, and the more negative effects, criminal, social, and medical, that you see in that population. And I mean, there's really easy to access information about that. In the middle school and the high school chapter, I actually put the myths and the facts about that. Because in the United States, a lot of people say, oh, well, all those people in Europe and France, they let kids drink early. And I think you guys know that that is not the case in many countries, especially if your gross domestic product is alcohol or wine. You revere it and you do not allow binge drinking. That is very dangerous to the brain. But we see, and even like countries like France, is problems with alcohol abuse and addiction, and the laws and the norms are changing. And so it's really important to dispel those myths. No matter where you are, the youth use and the younger youth engage in not only substance use, but behavioral addictions, or if they struggle with chronic mental health, the more they will arrest the development of executive functioning skills. And we see the effects long-term that are exponential.
Thank you. And the next question is, how many % genetic part to start any substance in younger generations?
How many genetic, I'm sorry, say that again.
I'm assuming they're asking potentially what percentage could be due to genetics and engaging in substance use, I think is what this question is trying to ask.
Oh, sure. Well, depending upon your genetics, we've always seen that nature versus nurture is 50-50. But we can actually get our genetics read today. And it's interesting because I got my genetics read, and I actually have one particular gene that puts me in the 74th percentile risk of growing up and becoming an addict. Now, here's an interesting piece. If I had never used drugs, that gene would not have expressed itself. But I also know that my genes tell my body to make less dopamine. And so I am more susceptible to things that spike dopamine levels too high. That includes behaviors as well. And so we know that snorting a line of cocaine increases dopamine by about 350%. But we also know that a half-hour viewing of pornography increases dopamine by about the same amount. So it's important to remember that your genes tell your body to make, synthesize, or process a lot of those neurotransmitters, hormones, and peptides differently. But it won't express if you don't expose yourself to it. That's why nature versus nurture is always about 50-50, but it depends upon your nature and nurture. I was just growing up with the genetics in a family that broke up and didn't monitor me well enough, and I had access. So all the things combined to get me there. But if we teach parents early exposure while you're pregnant to substances and negative behaviors, if we start growing early development skills like brain-based parenting, attachment skills for our parents, we can start to see their mindset change and them prevent early substance use in their kids and grow those executive functioning skills so that kids will protect their brain as they grow and develop.
Wow, so true. And thank you for sharing about your own genetics. Wow, 70%. Wow, incredible. The next one seems like more of a comment. Living with bipolar disorder may be autosomal, imbalance of serotonin, dopamine, and neurotransmitters, most probably responsible factors, mood swing, and manic depressive psychosis. I don't think that's really a question. Yoga, games, and sports, it keeps bodily fit, body, mind set up, mentally strong, versus ABCD, referring to that adolescent brain and cognitive development study.
Definitely. And it's so interesting because what we want to teach kids is how to fall in love with our brain, keep it away from risky behavior that could hurt it, like substances that many kids use as a medicine for anxiety, mood issues, mood swings, like bipolar disorder, which, okay, we all know negative feelings suck to have. They do. Shame, guilt, disappointment, confusion, they're all hard. But if we teach kids how to be emotionally literate, and how to handle negative feelings and experiences with healthy tools like the ones that you just listed early on. And then, of course, at the same time, give them refusal skills, set expectations for saying no. What we do is we create a frontal lobe that has the skills to be resilient and bounce back from hard stuff in life.
Absolutely. And then the last question so far we have is, have you addressed your program to city town boards of health?
Oh, well, I can. So I have presented to a lot of school districts, ISDs, who are changing policies because they have to, because of video game exposure, technology overuse. I'm working with an archdiocese of Houston, Galveston. We're trying to get smartphones out of classrooms. Anything that could arrest development. I have the data and research to present to a professional board or decision makers, anybody that might need this type of information. Just give me a contact and I can help you.
Awesome. And in the follow-up email that you'll get after this webinar, we're going to send links to Dr. Collier's, her information, her resources, and her contact information as well. So if you have those contacts, you can forward to her. We'll also send you a link with our resources and our marijuana and pregnancy educational project. There will be a link to the recording of the presentation. And then are we able to share your slides, Dr. Collier?
Absolutely. I will create a PDF of these and send them to you, and you're welcome to send them out to anybody who wants them.
Okay, amazing. So yes, we will send the recording along with her copy of her presentation, so that way everybody has that access. Wow. Well, thank you so much. And thank you again for everybody attending today. And it was just amazing. And I really appreciate it, Dr. Collier. And please, everybody complete the survey that we'll be sending out, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you guys. Take good care.